So over the last few weeks, we have developed a wonderful relationship with a sitting member of Congress named Kevin Kiley. And I don't know if all of our listeners out there know this, but there is currently an independent serving in the United States House of Representatives. So for everybody out there who says, I don't know how you really have a third party, can you really be independent of the two-party system? It's happening. It's happening right now. Kevin was elected as a Republican in California. And after Proposition 50 and the gerrymandering of the districts, he actually announced that he was going to leave the Republican Party. He has come out vocally against all of this partisan gerrymandering, this mid-cycle gerrymandering, and is registered as a no-party affiliation in California. And so we've been spending a lot of time talking to him about what that looks like. What does it mean to serve in the House as an independent? How can he plant a flag for other independents and third-party candidates around the country? And it's been really, really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's been very hard for people to imagine how would that work, right?
Yep.
How would it work to have a third-party caucus in the House of Representatives? And what a lot of people don't appreciate is that actually the rules are negotiated every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
And so if you
and
have
even in between, they can do
and they can
fiddling
even
in
do
between.
it in between.
Yep.
And so if you,
Absolutely.
for example, had a group of people led by Kevin Kiley who were not affiliated with either the Republicans or the Democrats, they could literally swing the vote on virtually every single action that occurs in Congress. And they would be able to renegotiate the rules so that they could have committee assignments, so that they could actually have a voice. And so all of the fear-mongering that goes around, you don't want to be an independent because you'll never get a committee assignment. You won't have any power. You'd actually have more power than everyone else in Congress.
Absolutely.
And we're going to provide them with more. I mean, he's going to have more members. I am convinced of it. We have a number of candidates that'll be forward candidates that are running for Congress.
Yeah,
Independent
last week we had them
and-
all fly out to New York. We did a huge day with all of them. And so we hope all of our listeners will go to our website at forwardparty.com and learn more about those members that we're sending to join Congressman Kiley in the House of Representatives. And it's this is real. It's happening.
It is. And if anyone is out there who's listening, who's in Congressman Kiley's district, or if you'd just like to help him out and come to forward and volunteer, we have ways that you can volunteer and assist people from anywhere in the country.
Now, we're providing the base. We're providing the structure for him to do this, really. I mean, he's doing it because of his own conscience, and that's wonderful. But the problem for independents has always been once they break with the party, there's been no infrastructure on the
What's their
grassroots
safety
level.
net? What do they jump to?
Yeah, exactly.
Who are their volunteers?
And who are their volunteers? Who's
Yeah.
going to be helping them raise money? Who's going to help them at home when they have their races and the party that they left run somebody against them?
Well, you've posed on different episodes, Governor Whitman, the idea of the Forward Party being a movement. Why are we building a political party instead of just a movement? And it is exactly that infrastructure.
Right,
That's
exactly.
the answer, is that, yes, Kevin Kiley can be supported by a movement, but he also just needs the functions of a campaign structure. How do you get a campaign manager? How do you find volunteers? How do you raise money? All of the things that you need to do to run for office. That's what the Forward Party is building for these folks.
Now, a lot of people ask the question, if they've been in this space for a while, they've heard about No Labels, they've heard about the Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress, and they say, why would it be different having an independent caucus, a Forward Party caucus in Congress? And the answer is that they would not be able to be intimidated by either the Republicans or the Democrats. And in the end, as great of an idea as the Problem Solvers Caucus is and was, they have not been able to come together at critical times and select, or sway the selection of a speaker or pass key legislation outside the infrastructure bill.
They couldn't take on their leadership.
They could not take on their own leadership because they were too afraid that there wouldn't be anything for them outside that two-party system. And we're here to tell them that there is.
Well, that's
there is something there for them.
And leadership's a really important thing to invoke, because I don't think what most Americans realize, and unless you really spend time in Congress and understand the rules of the chamber, how consolidated power is with leadership.
Leadership,
So
exactly.
leadership controls everything. And we saw evidence of this over the past year when government kept shutting down and Mike Johnson would just send everybody home. And you go, no, I elected them to stay there
To
and do a
work.
job.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, everybody else in the world has to work.
Exactly. Yeah,
5
everybody
days a
else has
week
to work.
and-
But power is consolidated
Right.
in the four corners, in the Senate and in the House. Hakeem Jeffries and Mike Johnson consolidate that power. They control the strings. They control what legislation people are able to read, how advanced
Whether
they could
something
talk
can even
about
come
it,
up for
what
a
they
vote.
talk about,
whether
and
anything can
how
even
they
come
talk
up to a
about it.
vote. And what's so cool about the vision that we have for this fulcrum that is very real is they would be the ones to force the vote. They would be able to
Right.
make rules changes to force votes on common sense issues that the American people, all these issues where there's like 87% consensus.
And there's so many. And
Oh,
there are
there's
so
so many
critical
issues.
issues that are that's facing America today that neither party is putting front and center.
Right.
I mean, our national debt, $39 trillion. I
And
mean,
this new budget is going to send
who's
it.
talking
Ridiculous.
about balancing the budget? Who's
Right.
actually talking about what that is going to do to the fiscal health of this country in the future? Who's talking about the fact that Social Security is going to run out of money in 6 years,
exactly.
and our seniors are going to have to take a pay cut, if you will, of 25% or more, just because Congress hasn't figured out how to refund.
And there are solutions out
and
there.
there's easy
They-
solutions.
That's the problem. That's the
There
other
are
problem
easy
is
solutions.
the parties don't want to solve the problems because they are. First of all, if they solve those difficult problems that you're talking about, the really essential ones, they're going to make a whole lot of people mad, and that means they might lose some races, and all they care about is power.
And they're going
And-
to lose power entirely
make-
if they don't solve
They'll
those
make
big
Exactly.
they'll make the
problems.
Well,
people
we'll lose
mad in the
everything.
far extremes of their parties
Yes.
because that's who they have to be responsive to.
But that's the other thing. It's why they won't even. There are solutions for this immigration issue that we
Absolutely.
face. There are common sense, practical solutions, but they won't take the issue up in a sensible way because they like that issue to excite their base. To your point,
And raise
to
money
get
off
their-
of it.
and raise money off it, and that's all they care about. They don't care about solving our nation's problems that we elect them to do.
Well, any political ad, any American that's subjected to watching these horrible political ads,
Ugh.
it's exactly what they're doing. They're taking the wedge issue on the other side, saying they refuse to do anything about it. When the reality is there's huge
That
opportunities.
neither
for
party is
consensus.
doing
Neither
anything
party,
about
yeah.
it.
Neither.
Both
Right.
of them enjoy it because each party has had great opportunity during the first 2 years of their president's term to solve every problem, right? Both the Democrats and the Republicans have enjoyed having the House, the Senate, and the presidency together for the first 2 years of that president's term. They could have solved everything. They could have done anything they wanted
Anything
to
they
do during
wanted to
that
do.
time.
Yep.
If there are problems left, we have the two-party system to blame.
Yeah. Our guest today is former Maryland Lieutenant Governor Michael Steele, and who served as chairman of the Republican National Committee. And I actually worked.
And a lieutenant governor when I was lieutenant
He was
governor.
lieutenant governor at the
Yes.
same time as you. And I worked on Michael's Senate race when he ran in Maryland in
Okay.
2006. It was 20 years ago. And we cut an ad that was brilliant. And he said, you're going to hear all these things about me from the other party. You're going to hear things like Michael Steele hates puppies, and those kind of divisive allegations of one party refusing to do something or the other. That was 20 years ago. And the ad concluded with him holding a Boston Terrier and saying, "For the record, I love puppies." but it's that same tit for tat blame game.
Absolutely.
That I was on a campaign that did it 20 years ago.
Yeah,
And so
no.
I think Kevin is a huge source of inspiration and hope for all of us who have been building for a
And
long
he's
time.
brave.
It's
He's
wonderful.
incredibly
brave.
brave.
He has
He's very
incredible
brave. He's-
character. And I think that's what we need. We need people with character and principle to serve in government, to be willing to say, I will stand up to the heat that he's going to get from both sides
Yeah.
running as an independent. Now, it's interesting. California has a top 2 system.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to see whether an independent can
And really-
actually break into that top 2.
What's really great is that he's staying in Congress. So many of those who have left have said, well, I really don't like what's going on. I hate it. But they didn't have what it took to stand up and say, and do that while in office and work to stay in office. He's doing it.
So many people feel driven out either by the
Yes.
Democratic Party or by the Republican Party, and they give up, as you're
They
saying.
give up.
They just give
That's
up. They say, I'm not
they
going to
don't
run
fight.
again.
Right.
But they could run again.
Mhm.
They could run as independents.
They could fight the battle.
and
Yeah,
they
call
could
us.
be themselves. Call us.
Call us. We're
We'll
here.
help you.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that is, I think this is really the kind of magic here of Kevin leaving the Republican Party, running for reelection as an incumbent, independent in a top 2 state.
Yes.
It's why election reform is fundamental to Forward's platform, because in a top 2 election, you eliminate that concern of a spoiler, because everybody appears on one ballot in the state of California on one primary day, and the top 2 vote getters go to the general.
Right.
and it allows independents to vote.
Yep.
You know, in
Yes.
so many states, independents are a huge part of the electorate. In Massachusetts, it's 62%. And the idea that you wouldn't be able to participate in a primary meaningfully, or not select the candidates who are coming, to that primary. It's a great improvement to have all of the candidates on one ballot that you can select from.
It's because, frankly, we think we have the right to vote, and that we think we're electing we have freedom to elect our representatives. We don't.
No.
We have a freedom to vote for the candidates that the party gives us. We don't have the freedom to vote for the people we think would be the best in office until we open up the process. And that's one of the things that Forward's all about, that we're working on. Is
We have to
with
open
our
up the
candidates,
primary
you've got to
systems.
open up that process. So
Brian Fitzpatrick, you were talking about the Problem Solvers Caucus, Lieutenant Governor.
Yes.
Brian Fitzpatrick is a member of Congress from Pennsylvania. He's a Republican. He was the co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus. He actually, in an interview not too long ago with Punchbowl News, said on the record, if Pennsylvania had open primaries, I would leave the Republican Party and become an independent. So that's the thing, is you've got these folks Brian Fitzpatrick's there. He's part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. He's trying to make a difference. And the two parties have this stranglehold on our election systems to prevent him from doing just that, from being an independent leader. So let's get those primaries opened up in Pennsylvania so that Brian Fitzpatrick
all across the country
can join us.
Absolutely. And, Governor Romney and I would never have been elected in Massachusetts as Republicans to serve as governor and lieutenant governor if we had not had open primaries. And if those independents couldn't have joined in and influenced the outcome of the Republican Party in that state to elect people who are more moderate, who had broader appeal for people in the state. Think about how democratic that state is. People always ask, how is it that Republicans get elected as governor in Massachusetts again and again? It's simply because of the open primary system. So those kinds of reforms matter and help to moderate discussions in states that otherwise would be completely monolithic.
Yeah, and you get Charlie Baker, Kerry Healey, Mitt Romney type Republicans.
Bill Weld.
Bill Weld.
Lisa Murkowski would not be in the Senate were it not for the open primaries.
No, and they even took it a step further in Alaska. They have a totally nonpartisan primary, the same way that California does. But then instead of elevating only 2 choices to the general in Alaska, you get 4, and then you rank them.
Yep.
So that combined
there are all sorts of different ways of doing it.
But of course, the Republican Party has been fighting it tooth and nail ever since it passed, spending millions and millions of dollars. That was the will of the people. It was a ballot measure, went straight to the voters of Alaska, and the two parties keep trying to undo it.
Yeah, and ranked choice voting in Maine has been challenged again and again.
Oh, yeah.
So this is, I think the two parties know that they're up for a fight now, that people do want more democracy, not less. And, we just have to keep at it.
Oh, look at New Mexico. When they passed a ballot measure to open the system, open the primaries, but because of a quirk in their law, they had to bring it back the next year. And that's when the two parties came in and spent millions of dollars, the Republicans particularly, and defeated it.
It's unbelievable. If there are any antitrust attorneys listening to us right now, I mean, the two parties, it's unbelievable the lock that they have on the market. I mean, it is a market. And if the SEC, if our political system was regulated the way the SEC regulates our markets, there's no way that what they're doing is legal. At the crux of talking about Kevin is leadership, right? I mean, Kevin is leading. As you said, Governor, he made this incredibly principled move to leave the Republican Party. He didn't just quit or resign, but he said, I'm going to stay. I'm going to serve my constituents, and I'm going to do it in a way that's authentically independent. And we're so thrilled to build a structure for that. And so today we are joined by another amazing leader, and we're asking a different kind of question. What would leadership look like if it didn't have to run through party lines at all?
Whoa.
And to explore that, we're joined by Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, former lieutenant governor of Maryland, and my thrice former boss.
3 times.
So if leadership is shaped by incentives, then maybe what we're seeing isn't a failure of people, but of the system they're operating in. Michael, thank you for joining us and for bringing your perspectives.
Well, it is a real treat for me to be in a conversation with some incredibly smart people that I've enjoyed working with. I remember us being back in the day, me being a young candidate, well, relatively young, and
we were all younger.
Yeah, I know there was that point, and Lindsey just kind of getting in my ear, going, "No, you're going to do this," and I'm like, "Okay, yes, ma'am." That's how it works. Governor, it's good to see you as always. It's just great to be with all of you. So, I think the failure in our system right now works in 2 ways. One is the failure of obvious leadership of the men and women we have elected, who have presumed roles, have titles and position. But it's also a failure of the American people, in one sense, to be the check that the founders wanted them to be, which is why they placed the power in the hands. We are a government of, by, and for people, not institutions, not an individual, not a president, not a governor. The 50 states each operate and function within their own space. That's what the 10th Amendment allows. That's what their independence allows. And within those states are people who decide the kind of leadership they want to lead them. Leadership is ultimately the extension of the people. The people who elected the governor and myself in our respective races trusted us, thought that we best reflected their values, whether they were Democrats, Republicans, independents, unaligned. And to the extent that they came out and participated in the system, they had expectations. And the one thing that one quote I've always loved from Alexis de Tocqueville was, there's nothing worse than unmet expectations. And that is the moment we're in right now. Our leadership has failed to meet the expectations of the people. And the people feel the way they do, I think rightly so. But we also have to be somewhat introspective as well and see that we've allowed these institutions to be created, parties, factions, which the founders were very much hesitant to see operationalized here in this new country, to take control. And so how do we get back that control? And that's going to be the test of the American resolve, I think. It's not whether or not we have a good foreign policy or good healthcare policy. It's whether we resolve as a nation to actually control the government that we have created.
We were just talking about factions because we were talking about Chris Gibson. I don't know if you've read his book, Michael, called The Spirit of Philadelphia. And we were talking about the concern of those factions and parties. And Lieutenant Governor Healey, we were actually just having this discussion.
Yeah, we were just having the conversation about how John Adams genuinely was, his words were, "I dread the development of a two-party system like we have today," and that he thought it was potentially the greatest evil that could come out of our Constitution. And the other more positive thing we were just talking about, though, on this podcast was that Kevin Kiley has had the courage to step out of the Republican Party after his district had been redistricted into 6 different segments. And he also had the courage not to choose to run in the district that seemed safest out of those 6, but rather the one where he thought it might be most independent-minded. And he became an independent. I don't know if you've been following this, but we're greatly encouraged that we're seeing someone with such courage in Congress. And how do you think this might inspire others to join him? How important is that example?
Yeah, well, I look at our races, LG. I mean, you and I were in our offices around the same time, and we brought a certain dynamism to our leadership. We had the ability to, again, as I said, be that extension of the people that sent us to office. And when that breaks down, the question becomes, if you have a real heart for public service, which I know you have, I have, the governor has, you then find yourself, what do I do next? And there's always this question of whether or not I get off the train that I'm currently riding and stand at the depot and wait for the next train, meaning the next election or the next opportunity, or do I get off the train and go onto a completely different track, catch a very different train? And when you have candidates, and there are a growing number of them now that are beginning to do that. Kyle Swiester in Alabama, for example, is an independent Democrat.
Mm-hmm,
all right.
mm-hmm.
But then you have other candidates who are breaking away completely from the party structures. I think that's healthy for the system. I've always considered myself to be a disruptor in the system, which is why they like me so much.
We like you, Michael.
They loved me when I was county.
Yeah, we love you.
County chairman, state chairman, RNC, especially as RNC chairman, they really loved me because I really believed in this idea that you can't allow the systems to control the service. And when that happens, you have to find, if you are true to your own charism, if you will, of public service, being a public servant, then you're going to try to find another way. And I think it's important on all of us, which is why Forward is important. And our Republican Legacy, which is a group of current and former Republican officials that, put together by Senator John Danforth and others, myself included, to sort of create a space for those Republicans who want to engage in, retaking the party in some form, not to reconstruct the heydays, but to plant the flag for what those principles were and are, but also have a space where you can now create a third, fourth opportunity or choice for voters. And whether that is what Forward and its candidates put up or something else, I think the season is right for that. And now how do we inform and educate? And so the example of candidates who are now moving into this space, who are shedding those labels, those old labels, those worn labels, putting on a fresh cloak, and trying to create a new message that's going to rally their community and hopefully at some point the nation. I think it's very, very important. And I think it's something that cannot be easily dismissed. And you're going to see more of it as we begin to move into the next cycle after this upcoming November.
So, Governor, you and Lieutenant Governor Steele were both truth tellers when there were shifts happening within the Republican Party.
We tried.
In a very
we
public
tried
way.
within the party.
And so Michael Steele gave an interview to, was it the Washington Post, in the summer of 2006, when you said running as a Republican is like wearing a scarlet A on your jersey right now. And around the same time, you had released your book, It's My Party Too. And
Great book.
And I remember the phone calls that came from Karl Rove after that Washington Post article. It was not good. It was not good. But you all were being truth tellers. And so here we are 20 years later in terms of being truth tellers. And, Michael, you just said you feel like the moment is different now. People want truth tellers. People are looking for infrastructure and homes for truth tellers. Why is it different now than it was when you first started? Kind of, you all three of you all were bellwethers for this.
Well, Michael and I were we tried to change the party, twice with different organizations from within. And the problem is that the parties don't want it to change. They've got things just the way they want it. And they don't want anything to disrupt that. And that's why, I got the text too to join your new group. And I said, been there, done that. No.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
time to break away from that. We have got to recognize that it just, and frankly, I think it's going to be a long time before you can recapture the name of Republican. And really say I'm a different Republican and have people disassociate it from what we're going through right now, without mentioning a name. I think that's going to be harder.
I would want to extend an open hand. I know everyone here would like to extend an open hand to any Republican, any former Republican who feels they still want to serve. And I think that Kiley will probably maybe open that door a little bit to say, Kiley hasn't changed. Did he change one day to the next in terms of his fundamental beliefs? No, but he believes that you shouldn't be manipulating the system, to win an election. He believes that he should be serving his constituents more than obeying the party. And that's something that I am hearing from our candidates really resonates. At a time when trust is so low in public servants, the idea that you're going to be responsive to your voters only and not, to the party dictates on either side seems to really, really resonate with people. And I think that could be a very powerful force in restoring some of the trust that's missing in Congress right now.
Michael, are you seeing other candidates that you would look to who are people who are right there on the edge of saying, I don't like what's going on right now. I want to be independent. I'm kind of stuck where I am because I've adopted a party, one side or the other,
Right.
Republican or Democrat, that you think is someone who, if they knew there was an infrastructure behind them who would support them if they were to make that move to independence, would make that move, who would come to the Forward Party?
Yeah, that's the big question. Those folks are there, and many of them right now are struggling in primaries. So whether they're doing, in some cases, like some states have jungle primaries for primaries.
That's where Kiley's got a top two primary.
Kiley's got that. And so it's everybody into the pool, and the two best swimmers will get to the final. You have situations like that. Then you have others who are, and I mentioned Kyle Swiester in Alabama, who are running. He was a Republican who switched to the Democratic Party because the party no longer spoke to his truth and represented values that he could no longer be the face for. And so he switched to the Democratic Party in Alabama. What is interesting is that he does have resonance. And this is the key part. There are going to be a lot of bodies on the battlefield, a lot of sacrifices that will be made by various candidates running. We've already seen this in races that we had in Utah with our friend who was running for the U.S. Senate.
Evan McMullin.
Evan McMullin. And that model of a candidate, Democrat or Republican, running in a space that they otherwise would not be successful in because of the political dynamics. It's a D+20 and you're a Republican, or an R+30 and you're a Democrat. And getting the political structures within that state or that county to stand down and get behind that individual. That's another tactic that's getting more and more, conversation, and people are looking at a little bit more. My point being that there are now different ways in which these candidates will begin to emerge onto this field. And a lot of that will be either through reforms within the parties themselves that have just had enough and saying this is no longer working. And a number of states now are looking at the jungle primary system. I've been an advocate of eliminating the primary. I recommended it when I was national chairman. You know how that conversation went. because I saw that being one of the root evils of why our system is the way it is right now.
We're locking out competition. It fundamentally locks out competition.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the Republican Party is supposed to believe in competition and free market.
Right. You know, if I've got a better idea than you, or you have a better idea than me, then let's get in the ring and throw the ideas around and see which one the people take hold of. But they're afraid of that because it goes to what the governor just said a moment ago. And that is the system does not want the change. So it is built to push out their voters, not every vote. When I give talks, I ask people in the audience, how many of you here believe that your party, whether you're Democrat or Republican, really don't care, wants every citizen in the United States who's eligible to vote to vote? And you know, every time not one hand goes up. People know. People know how this system is rigged.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing we do want, right? We want every single voter who can vote.
That's right.
Everyone with a legal right should vote, should be able to vote.
Yeah. So, Michael, you led a political party. You served as the national chairman. You served as the chairman of the Maryland party. We are building a political party. And one of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast is why are we doing this as a party, and kind of the how as a why, how and why. And the fact that if, as you just said, the system is incredibly entrenched. It's very, very difficult to introduce competition as an independent. What are some of your thoughts and advice in terms of party building, things that are critically important to introduce change?
Well, there are a number of things. I mean, you can start with obvious. Oh, money, you need lots of money. Okay, yeah, check that box, move on. Money is not the most critical piece, actually. It becomes critical, obviously. Sure. But what is critical is, do you know what you're going to be? I mean, you know, we've got Republicans, we've got Democrats. Republicans were once Whigs. Democrats were once Democratic Republicans, Democrat Republicans. So, I mean, the parties themselves have gone through an evolution. But they do have at their core the thing that brought them into being. Mm-hmm. And so when you're making this move, the question is, what are we going to be? And once we know what that is that what will move people towards us to want to be with us, to want to align themselves with us? And one of the big challenges is going to be, in all candor and frankness, we've had this conversation about the development and evolution of Forward, along with other political systems, is how do you then convince people who've been trained, going back to what I said before, the parties have trained voters. They've trained their voters to approach politics a certain way. That's why you hear people say, oh, I couldn't vote for a Republican. Oh, I could never vote for a Democrat, right? Because they've been trained to believe that they can't do anything but that, right? Because as we now see reinforced today by Republicans, these narratives that if you're a Democrat, you are some lefty communist pinko socialist that wants to make my kid trans and want to make, my, family read books about the Civil War. So all these narratives are linked together and reinforced over and over and over again. You're training the voter to think a certain way about politics, not about public policy, not about the fact that, oh, yeah, I don't want my kid to read this book. But, oh, guess what? There's no money in the public school system because they've just now eliminated the Department of Education. Yep. Or the kid doesn't have health care because, RFK Jr. has said, oh, no more vaccines. So they're not connecting those dots. And so the answer to what we are and what we want to be to voters becomes critically important. Yeah. Because then you have to retrain them. You've got to get them off of the idea that they can only be a Democrat or they can only be a Republican. When I can tell you, and you all know this, in their hearts, they know that's not true. In their hearts, they know they can be something else because they believe something else.
Well,
They want something else.
And people are voting with their feet, Michael. I mean, that's
exactly
the most
yes.
interesting part is they may not even know what that other thing is yet, but they know they can remove themselves from the conversation of I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat by simply unenrolling, and becoming an independent. And what we offer as a party in terms of that identity is our principles, which are dead easy. And, when I first joined this movement, I looked at our principles and I thought, well, who couldn't go along with that? There are things like obeying the Constitution, rule of law, collaborating across the aisle in the best interest of the American people. We have, having data-driven policies, very straightforward things that people who have very different ideologies can sign up to because it's a philosophy, it's a set of principles. Yep. It's not a policy, it's not a wedge issue, it's not something to try to divide you from other people. We're actually trying to help people find the things that they have in common and to come together around a set of principles as opposed to push other people away. And we believe that people are going to tire of this idea that they have to be divided from one another, that they have to be one thing or another. And if they can find a place like Forward or like being an independent that gives them the option to do what they think is right and to serve their constituents, it's our hope that will be inspiring to them. And certainly the candidates who've come over to us so far have said it's absolutely freeing.
Yeah, and the Republican Party used to create space for that.
Yeah, can I piggyback on what the LG just said there, because I think it's important, but I also think there's challenge in that because you still at some point have to confront the governance reality. How do you move on issues that are polarizing or have been polarized? And they're not always the big obvious ones like abortion or something like that. I mean, that's just at this point, it becomes, almost a circular firing squad. Everybody just sitting around trying to, go at each other. But I think that there does become a point where, yes, I can make that leap, as a citizen from one party or the other into this independent space. We've seen that number grow here in Maryland. I tried to take advantage of it when I was state chairman and to allow independents to vote in our Republican primary. Because my thinking was, all right, well, if I can get you to align with, some of our ideas and policies that, prescriptions that we want to put out, and ultimately our candidates in a primary, I can hopefully carry that into a general. So there's some, crazy strategery there, to give an homage
crazy.
to.
That's how I got elected. No. Yeah, not crazy.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. So it becomes for Forward and others, it becomes a real challenging opportunity, and how you build that and bring people along becomes so critically important because, as you know by now, Lindsey, what you've always known, but certainly now leading Forward, that you can have a conversation in the morning in which you're told, this system or these beliefs or these ideas are really important and valuable. And then in the afternoon, have a conversation with a different group of people who are aligned with you going, well, that's not the most important thing. These things are.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Right. And that's what candidates navigate. But as you're starting to form a national presence, a national identity, a national idea, I think very much to Kerry's point, I have to see myself somehow reflected in that. And that's always the challenge when you coming from a polarized view of the world. How do whether or not I see myself in this idea that you're putting in front of me?
Yeah, right. No, that's a very good point. And that's one of the reasons why we have picked on about 10 major issues that we think are critical that the country address. And then basically, to make a long story short, given the states options within those to say, look, we think this, for instance, opening up, letting everybody vote. There are all sorts of different ways to do it. First across the poll, top 2, top 5, ranked choice voting, whatever. And then let them decide what they can get done. But we're not trying to tell them you have to use this particular way. The same thing with issues like climate change and the economy and military defense. Picking out those things that are important to the country and trying to give options to the candidates and to the parties, but not telling them it's this way or the highway.
Yeah, and you're right that there's a lot of consensus out there. We've recently been convening a number of our membership to try to determine what are those ideas, those commonly held beliefs that knit us all together. They're a very economically responsible group. I can tell you that there are certainly some economic policies that bind our movement together. They all care deeply about healthcare. I think one of the things that is really being neglected by both major parties right now is that healthcare is in a crisis in America, and 500,000 people a year are going bankrupt because of medical debt. And healthcare costs for a family of 4 are over $25,000 a year in most places. And yet that isn't a major topic of conversation, but it's something that people are feeling every day. And so when you talk to people who are forwardists, they really feel that healthcare is a right, that it's something that government ought to be engaged with, trying to solve this very important problem. And they want to see that at the top of the agenda, and it's not.
Yeah, and when presented with that problem last year to solve, they shut the government down. Both parties, they retreated into their corners and said, we're going to sit here and try and politicize this and blame the other people in an off-year election cycle to influence our races.
Because both parties know it's a pain point.
Right.
But so, and they like it like that. They like inflicting the pain one way or another so that they can campaign against each other.
They're inflicting the pain on the American people.
I can tell you that people involved in the forward movement and independence, they just want it solved. They just want it done.
They do. And so let's drill down on that aspect of it, because as the four of us know, particularly the 3 state officials here on this conversation, know that Washington is at the end of a typical day, the most irrelevant piece. The most relevant piece is the state legislature, the governor, the city council, the mayor. State and local chief executives and legislative bodies are the ones where public policy is grinded out, where it becomes a model, as we've seen from places like California, New York, Illinois, Florida, Maryland, different parts of the country where state legislatures make decisions, put in place public policy that then become models for other states.
Healthcare in Massachusetts.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So very much
we just
to
celebrated our 20th anniversary of healthcare reform in Massachusetts.
Well, let's talk about that. I'm glad you actually just went to where I wanted to go. Thank you, LG.
I love that arc. Isn't that wonderful?
How ironic was it to see that in the great state of Massachusetts, the former governor thereof, one Mitt Romney, came back to celebrate 20 years of a healthcare policy that have benefited the people of Massachusetts, that as a presidential candidate, he ignored and didn't even want to talk about. But recognizing it 20 years later, how ironic was that? And how important was that to the public narrative that it was a state like Massachusetts that solidified the idea in a presidential candidate like Barack Obama to create a national healthcare system that we euphemistically call Obamacare, but really should be Romney Care.
Well, and
which really should be the Heritage Plan.
Well, it should be Romney Care, but it should be the Romney-Kennedy plan. Honestly, Ted Kennedy was critical.
Oh, very much so.
To what we were able to accomplish in Massachusetts, as was the Democratic legislature. And what I saw last week in Massachusetts during the celebrations was something that I wish the entire country could have seen, because we had the Democratic governor standing up there on the rostrum. We had Governor Caucus in a wheelchair there at 93 years old. We had Mitt Romney. We had Bill Weld. I was there. Deval Patrick was there. My former opponent. When I ran for governor, we were all there together saying what a wonderful thing this bipartisan legislation was for Massachusetts. And Massachusetts is now, by many measures, the healthiest state in the country.
Yeah.
That people have been getting preventative health care. For 97% of the people in Massachusetts have health care, and it should be cheaper. Absolutely, it should be cheaper. But the fact that having health care makes people healthier, that shouldn't be a surprise. But that's actually the outcome of 20 years of 97 plus people, percentage of people in a state being covered. That's what happens, positive outcomes. So I have to say that I wish everyone could have seen it, and it can only happen in a bipartisan way.
Yeah.
And it can happen now, I believe, because an independent caucus could drive people toward that kind of collaboration or create a laboratory for that kind of collaboration.
Which to that point is why it's so important that the focus not be on getting someone in Congress or getting someone in the Senate, but getting someone in the state house and the state Senate, getting someone to run for mayor or city council or governor.
And we're doing all those things.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's because that's where you're going to have the greatest impact and the most change.
Building that bench.
The federal government is a lagging indicator. Now, on national security, okay, gotcha. On war, peace, gotcha. But on the day-to-day thing that impacts voters, citizens more directly, is where you're going to find that state and local leadership. And they're the ones, governor, lieutenant governor, you both know what it was like to go out and just, I'm going to stop in the Starbucks and get a coffee. And 45 minutes later, after, having a mini town hall with the citizens who stopped you while you were getting your coffee to talk to you about their local concerns,
right.
About a bridge that needed to be built or a road that needed to be repaired, or the healthcare system because you didn't have the certificate of need over in this area for heart transplants or whatever it happens to be, you hear it more directly from people at that level. And then over time that bubbles up where the federal government begins to pay a little bit more attention to that and begins to drive that national policy. It was Romney Care, it was Heritage and Romney Care that drove a federal policy on healthcare. At the end of the day, a state-oriented idea about how to deliver healthcare systems and healthcare itself in a way, to your point, Kerry, that covered 97% of your people.
Well, and Michael, I think that you referenced earlier some of these really extraordinary candidates that are running as independents or as folks who aren't running.
Independent within the political system,
within the political system. So maybe they're not running towards the extremes within their two parties in a primary. And what Evan McMullen's role was in seeding ground for that, normalizing that kind of culture in Utah where you didn't have competition other than that. And otherwise, and we now have 26 individuals running for state legislature on the forward party ballot line in Utah. So it is all relational. You see the sequencing of someone saying, look, this is possible, the art of the possible, building the state infrastructure, building the party functions to support these candidates, and then recruiting and running them for local office and for state ledge to then advance these policy positions. So it is the sequencing of all of those things together that is allowing us to see the progress.
And that's why we didn't run anyone for president in the last election cycle, and we don't necessarily aspire to do it in the next election cycle unless we're ready. We think that the grassroots up piece is really critically important.
Yep.
And so that's what we've been focused on. And so far, I think that strategy is working.
And see, and to that point about the presidency, I've never believed that's where you start. I've always thought, going back to Ross Perot, the third party concept fails out of the gate if you start running with the presidency, because that's not how people vote. People vote bottom up. I can't tell you the number of ballots that I've seen in which the gubernatorial candidate got less than the mayor, or the presidential candidate got less than the governor.
Governor Whitman, you want to take us home today?
Michael, thank you very much. It's been great to talk to you and with you. It always is. And your insights are important. And that's what we're doing here at Forward. We are building a party that's going to be from the ground up, with giving people the opportunity to vote for someone who really represents them and has the freedom to do what is important for their constituents without being controlled by a major party sitting over them saying, nope, this is where you have to be. So we're hoping for a better democracy. We're hoping for the kind of moving affiliations that our founding fathers really, really wanted to see, because they warned us about two-party system and what could happen and what would happen. So it's really important to talk to people like you that have done it at all the different levels. And we want to really thank you for participating with this podcast.
My pleasure. Each one and every one. That's how we do this. And I appreciate the work and the leadership of Forward in creating a local and national conversation at the same time about how we move forward as a country.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. It was
Great
to see you today.
Good to see you.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening today. If you found this valuable, please recommend the podcast to your friends and family, and we'll see you next time.